What is meditation all about? The word meditation has been called in different languages in different names. In India, it is called as dhyan. Dhyan may not be exactly the same word for meditation, because if we use the word meditation, we routinely say meditate upon. You please meditate. I meditated for 1 hour. So meditation is considered as an act of doing when we use it in English language. In India, with its Sanskrit roots, it is called as dhyan. The word dhyan came from thru, which means to hold. And the same dhyan is called as chan in China, zen in Japan, son in Korea, din in Arabic, so on and so forth. Whatever be the words, one must understand what exactly meditation is. Meditation basically is not a prayer, asking for the divine, whatever that we need in the social realms, or whatever that we need for our spiritual evolution. It is certainly not a prayer. In Indian language, prayer is called as prarthana. Prarthana means artha. Arthi means to beg. We don't have to beg or negotiate or do favors for so-called gods and the divine. Meditation is not an exercise like a morning walk. Like routinely we take up a morning walk between 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, something like that. It cannot be treated as an asana or any type of exercise or pranayama or sitting in lotus position and doing something. The act of doing can never be called as meditation. Please understand this point. Meditation is the name given to the state of consciousness which comes with the practice of something called as meditation method. With the practice of a certain method, a state of consciousness emerges. This state of consciousness is totally different from the known states of consciousness in waking and sleeping and during dreaming. The wakeful, dreaming, and sleep consciousness are totally different from the meditative state of consciousness. This meditative state of consciousness is something which can be called with the superimposition of all these three states of consciousness. It is something more deeper, more higher, more further, which is not understood, which is not perceivable, which is not experienced during these three states of consciousness. There is something different. But, however, converting every act of life with open eyes or closed eyes, the routine acts of life, the trivial and the turbulent, all the acts of life can be transformed and mutated into this meditative state of consciousness with the mastery of the meditative practices whatsoever. When it comes to meditation methods, as I told right now, anything can be converted into meditative practice. Like even talking can be converted into meditative practice. When you talk from deep, from within, viscerally, from the center of your consciousness, then the very act of talking can be converted into meditation. The act of listening, what we call as shravana, means listening with full consciousness, observing the sounds, observing the gaps between the sounds, the meaning of it, and simultaneous understanding without any bias or prejudice. The clear-cut shravana can also be converted into meditation. Simple walking, the way the foot touches the ground, the way the pressure is felt in the heels and the forefoot on the plantar aspects of one's feet, and walking with radiance, walking with grace, with full consciousness, the very walk turns into meditation. That's what we call as a walking meditation. Similarly, any activity whatsoever can be converted to meditation. But in the beginning stages, we should always practice with closed eye. Why closed eye? Because most of the inputs, most of the information that we receive from the external world, from this three-dimensional world, from this Vibhyara world, from this visible world, is through eyes, and followed by hearing. A lot of memory of information is obtained through auditory senses. And some level of information can happen to the tactile, the skin, sparsha, and tongue, and nose. So out of all these five senses, majority of the sensory inputs are obtained through eyes. So when we close the eyes and sit in an environment where there are no obnoxious sounds, no obnoxious smells, no mosquitoes or houseflies, and we are not eating anything, when all the sensory organs are closed, locked, and when we cross the legs, all the motor organs are also closed. And when we keep the hands like this and keep it on the lap, the hands are also locked. The body need to be in a most comfortable, most relaxed position. Every muscle should be, all the skeletal muscles should be totally relaxed, except for the paraspinal muscles, which keep the spine in erect position. That is most important. Keeping the spine erect is very helpful, especially in the beginning stages. So once we get mastery of the meditative consciousness, when meditative consciousness enters into the memory of the wakeful consciousness, then the very idea, very thought of getting into the meditative state makes us understand, makes us live in the higher state of consciousness. Meditative state of consciousness is nothing but the more subtle, more deeper, altered consciousness of one's own self. The consciousness which was there before taking birth, the consciousness which we are going to acquire immediately after so-called death, can be called as the meditative consciousness as well. The consciousness of the subtle body, the consciousness of non-physical body, is the meditative state of consciousness, to speak from a denser level. So meditation has to be practiced not, as I told, not as an exercise. It has to be in a passive environment. When I say passive, active concentration of what we are doing is not important. Active concentration can be a hindrance, in fact. So a passive watchfulness, the way we watch the clouds, the way we watch the nature, the way when we are totally relaxed out of our work, just for the sake of just enjoying the nature. So this type of, the type of consciousness which is normally observed during these states of activity can be called as meditation. So we are going to take some time for a few minutes to understand practically what is meditation. Here, we suggest the soulfulness meditation. When I say soulfulness, the head and the heart, they both merge into one and turn into something called as soulfulness or soul consciousness. So the ana, which is called as the in breath, and the apana, which is called as the out breath, they both meet in the lower abdomen, and they convert as samana. So it is something totally different. So the inhalation and the exhalation, they both turn into something called as samana. So what is observed as the flow of air in the form of breath, and what is observed as the rise and fall of abdomen, when we are taking abdomen as a reference point of observing the breath, what happens is the air slowly turns into energy. Ana turns into prana. The inhalation, the breath flow turns into prana, energy flow. And this energy flow slowly turns into consciousness. So breath, energy, consciousness. So finding and understanding, observing, watching breath as the flow of consciousness is the ultimate way of understanding meditation. And once we understand that we are consciousness, we find a center of it. Like we have energy centers, which are called as chakras, from Muladhara chakra to Sahasrara chakra. We have got something called as center of consciousness. The center of consciousness lies in the lower belly, viscerally 2 inches below the navel. It is 2 inches wide and 2 inches within from the parietal layer from the skin. And this lemon-sized area, space called as the hara or hiranyagarbha, slowly increases in size with the depth of meditation, with more watchfulness of our own meditative state of consciousness, more experience of our own meditative state of consciousness. And during meditation, one might get a lot of so-called meditative experiences because what were never seen with the energy fields, our inner eye, our mind's eye opens up, and we might see so many types of images, so many types of lights can be seen, so many images of one's previous lives might be seen, many sages might be seen, but keep them away. Come back to what has to be done and dwell into the consciousness, the deeper level of consciousness. The more you dwell inside, you become an indweller, an eternal, permanent indweller. So in Sanskrit, it is called as ayatanavan bhavati, which means be an eternal indweller. One has to dwell within oneself. The tendency for the consciousness to get exteriorized, the tendency to become external for the consciousness is very quick in the social reality. So the meditator, in order to achieve mastery, has to repeatedly practice so-called meditation. I suggest always 5 times a day, 3 to 5 times a day at least, 3 times, thrice a day. Even in India, ancient India, the practice of penance was observed 3 times. It is called a Trikala Sandhya. Trikala Sandhya means the 3 times there is a periods of silence, periods of penance. The Pratah Sandhya, that is early in the morning, twilight time, where the dawn merges into the light. The early first sun ray enters the planet Earth. That is called as the Pratah Sandhya. Madhyamika Sandhya is the peak noon, and the Sayam Sandhya is the second twilight, where the light merges into the dark. So two twilights plus a peak noon together is called a Trikala Sandhya. And what I suggest is, instead of strictly following these 3 time zones, we can at least sit for meditation 3 times a day, or at least or more, or 5 times a day. One sitting in all these 3 or 5 may be a little longer, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So this longer sitting makes us expand the attention span. So this attention, the very attention, the passive attention of breath slowly turns into awareness. Attention turns into awareness. If you say awareness, awareness of what? Awareness of breath, or awareness of energy, or awareness of consciousness. You become aware of something. This awareness, once it is sustained, that turns into awakening. In awakening, you don't say awaken to something. You just awaken, that's all. Awaken to higher state of consciousness. That is what is meant by awakening. You get up from a so-called denser psychological, denser emotional state to a subtle spiritual state. That is what is called awakening. So attention turns into awareness, awareness turns into awakening. So prana turns into prajna. Prana means energy, prajna means consciousness. And in India, we call it as prajnanam brahma. That means Brahma means consciousness. I am the consciousness, basically. I am a speck of consciousness. I'm a unit of consciousness. I'm an iota of consciousness. So we are basically consciousness, which has some marks or clouds, which are called as, which is collectively called as the mind. The clouds covering the consciousness is called as the mind. So we are not mind. We use the mind for something else to survive in the social reality. Our application of spiritual wisdom in the denser realms, otherwise called as social reality. So let us move into this meditation. Please sit straight. Keep your hands like this. Small gap between the two thumbs. Keep it in your lap. Drop your shoulders. Relax your head. Relax your feet. Relax your shoulders. And just watch the breath without changing its pattern, without changing its rate or rhythm. No deep breathing or slow breathing. Let it be natural. What is natural for you? Please watch that. This process of watching the breath uninterruptedly, without trying to change its rate or rhythm or whatever. So watching one's natural breath is called as anugama, uninterrupted, unbiased, unprejudiced. Watchfulness of one's natural breath is called as anugama. When you slowly watch your breath, the inhalation and exhalation, please take abdomen as a reference point. Whenever you inhale, let the abdomen rise. Whenever you exhale, let the abdomen recede. During the exhalation, the abdomen goes within, relaxedly. No forceful movement. Taking abdomen as a reference point of observation of breath is called as sthapana. Sthapana means fixing or taking something as a reference point of observing the breath. Anugama means unbiased, uninterrupted, watchfulness of natural breath. And sthapana means taking abdomen as a reference point of watchfulness of one's breath. As you watch, the breath becomes more deeper. It cannot be shallow. People who are shallow breathers, people who are just breathers, are the people who are more frustrated, more agitated. They are not composed. They are reactive. They are not indwellers. They are outdwellers. When breath becomes abdominal, you become an indweller. You become a person who stays within. You become a person who stay centered, who stay grounded. Exhalation is more important than inhalation because whenever you exhale and connect directly to the center of one's being, otherwise called as Hiranyagarbha or Hara, the center of your soulfulness. You connect to the seat of the soul. Second half of exhalation is even more important. As you sink into the abdomen, a deeper part of your abdomen, the core of your consciousness. This core of consciousness in Sanskrit is called as Bija. Bijavadana. Avadana means contemplation of the Bija, the seed consciousness. So staying centered at the seed consciousness is called as meditation. Awakening happens with the experiential understanding of the seed consciousness. Meditation cannot be understood conceptually. Meditation cannot be understood intellectually as well. It has to be experienced. You have to sit time, you have to take time for it. Regular sittings of meditation for at least 5 minutes for every sitting helps a lot. Like that, 3 to 5 sittings will be extremely helpful. The terminal point of exhalation is the ultimate one because That is the point where you can experience a moment of nirvana, a moment of absolute silence. Meditation is nothing but the state of consciousness which is absolutely silent. Silence is our very nature. The whole breath, inhalation and exhalation, has to be observed only for this moment of nirvana, that is the terminal point of exhalation. No active concentration is required. Just be passive, like a child, like an animal, like a yogi. All these three categories of people, if you observe, their abdomen rises and falls with every inhalation and exhalation. Watch a child, his abdomen rises and falls with every inhalation, exhalation. Same with any animal, same with any yogi. Diaphragm is a garbage bin of so many types of emotions. When the exhalation becomes deeper, longer, diaphragm is pushed down and makes the anterior abdomen rise with every inhalation and recede with every exhalation. Normal breath, shallow breathing, diaphragm is not at all used. There is a block in the diaphragm, a psychological block, an emotional block. That's why most of the people have become chest breathers. And it's more agitated, more depressed, more agitated, more disturbed. Let the nose and navel be in one straight line. Add an inner smile, smile from your lower abdomen. If you add an inner smile, your consciousness becomes wholesome. You feel the whole body, you feel everything as a whole. Have an inner smile in the lower abdomen, and with each breath, let the abdomen rise and fall. Smoothly, passively. Passive attention of the breath is the key. The passive attention of the breath in the lower abdomen, viscerally, internally, is the key here. Japa and mantra are not required. Japa means repetition of words. Mantra also means the same. The repetition of words are not required. Consciousness rules energy. Consciousness governs energy. If you catch hold of consciousness, the entire energy body is taken care of. Your breath should flow like oil without any jerks, without any gaps, without any pauses. Smooth, no turbulence here. Add an element of letting go to the exhalation. You let go of your head, you let go of your heart, so that you become more soulful at your center of your being. The center of your being is your real teacher. Be watchful of your breath passively. No forced concentration is required. Passive, plain, unbiased watchfulness of the breath in your lower abdomen is what is required. Slowly open your eyes, but the mind's eye should be on your lower abdomen viscerally. Even in your wakeful state, when the mind's eye is totally internalized, when the mind's eye is totally made visceral, you stay centered. You become an eternal indweller. Thank you very much. Kindly get into this practice for at least 3 to 5 times a day. Each time 5 minutes. One sitting can be a little longer. Thank you.